Hey guys, welcome to your first official online reading lesson. So I'm going to be doing our core lessons like this where I teach you some new content using a text, and then you're going to go off online and do your assignment. So that's sort of how reading is going to go from here on out. So we are switching gears. We're going to go from reading nonfiction text to fiction text. And I want to introduce you to a new genre that maybe you haven't heard of yet. Called realistic fiction. So behind me is an anchor chart, and I'm going to go over there and we're going to talk about it. But first, let's look at our I can statement over here, okay? So it says, I can use the words and illustrations to determine if a text is realistic fiction. That's our learning goal today, and that's what I want us to focus on during this lesson. So by the end of the lesson, you're going to be able to determine if a text is realistic fiction or not, based on the words and the illustrations that you see in here, okay? So our anchor chart. Realistic fiction is a genre where stories have made up characters, but they could be real. So that means that everything that we're going to be reading in this realistic fiction genre is going to be made up, of course. The characters are fictional, they're not real, but they could be. So there are characters that you can really relate to because they might be kids that remind you of yourself or one of your friends. There's moms and dads, and the stories often have problems that you can really relate to because they're kind of everyday normal problems that kids have. So criteria, that means this is the stuff that the book has to have in order to be classified as realistic fiction. So the first one is, could the setting be real? So if the setting could be real, the setting is at a house or a park or a school, those are all real things, then it could be realistic fiction. Next, could the characters be real? So we're not talking about Martians and fairy princesses and unicorns. We're talking about kids, moms, dads, teachers, people that could be real. Lastly, are the problem and solution believable? That means that the problem isn't far-fetched. It's something that you might experience in your life, and it could be real. Lastly, is the book realistic fiction? I will unveil this when we're finished reading, and we'll see if this book is realistic fiction or not. All right, so here we go. I told you in one of my last videos that we were starting this book, The Stories Julian Tells. So here is the cover. This is the main character, Julian. Can't get the glare to go away. There we go. There's Julian. He's the main character. This is his little brother, Huey. And let me read the blurb for you on the back. Remember, the blurb on the back of the book often tells you kind of a synopsis or a summary of what you're going to read in the book. So here it is. Julian, that quick fibber, fibbing is like telling lies, and wishful thinker, is great at telling stories. He can make people, especially his younger brother, Huey, believe just about anything. But some stories can get you into a pack of trouble. And that's exactly where Julian and Huey find themselves all too often. So, do you think these two are going to get into some mischief, some trouble? I think so too. Let's read chapter 1. Let me go to the table of contents and show you. So there are 6 chapters, and we're reading this first one today, The Putting Like a Night on the Sea. There we go. Remember, as I'm reading, be thinking about, is this story realistic fiction? Remember the criteria that I have above me in the anchor chart. Can it be realistic fiction if it has these things? Yes. So ask yourself, is the setting real? Are the characters real? The problem and solution realistic? Then it's probably realistic fiction. So we're going to pay close attention. Remember what our I can statement said. We're going to pay close attention to the words and the illustrations in this book to determine if it is realistic fiction. Here we go. The Putting Like a Night on the Sea. I'm going to make something special for your mother, my father said. My mother was out shopping. My father was in the kitchen, looking at the pots and the pans and the jars of this and that. What are you going to make? I said. So they've already mentioned the setting to us. Who caught it? Where are they? The kitchen. You're right. They're in the kitchen. So that comes to our first criteria point. So could the setting be real? Do we have kitchens? Mm-hmm. We all have kitchens. That's a very realistic setting. So far, we've got our first check mark. It is a realistic setting. All right, I'm going to keep reading. Pudding, he said. My father is a big man with wild black hair. When he laughs, the sun laughs in the window panes. When he thinks, you can almost see his thoughts sitting on all the tables and the chairs. When he is angry, me and my little brother, Huey, shiver to the bottom of our shoes. What kind of pudding will you make? Huey said. A wonderful pudding, my father said. It will taste like a whole raft of lemons. It will taste like a night on the sea. Then he took down a knife and sliced 5 lemons in half. He squeezed the first one. Juice squirted in my eye. Stand back, he said, and squeezed again. The seeds flew out on the floor. Pick those up. Huey, he said. Huey took the broom and swept them up. My father cracked some eggs and put the yolks in the pan and the whites in a bowl. He rolled up his sleeves and pushed back his hair and beat up those yolks. Sugar, Julian, he said, and I poured in the sugar. He went on beating, and then he put some lemon juice and cream, and he set the pan on the stove. The pudding bubbled, and he stirred it fast. Cream splashed on the stove. Wipe that up, Huey, he said, and Huey did. So we've already been introduced to some characters. As you know, if we reference back to another anchor chart we used earlier, see if you remember this one. I can find it. Remember, stories take us on a ride? Well, in the beginning, what is introduced? Can you see? That's right. The characters in the setting are always introduced in the beginning of a story. On a typical story arc or a story structure, always in the beginning of the story, they're going to introduce us to the characters in the setting. So, thinking about our I can statement, our target, our learning target for